The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
Good evening, everybody. It's that time again, and welcome to the ArenaBowl Tuesday version of This Week in the AFL. I am Erik Watkins. I'm going to be piloting the ship tonight, but don't you worry, not flying solo. I have beside me Mr. Connor Akeman. Connor, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Erik. How about you?
Pretty good. Had a couple of weird balls thrown at me today, but thankfully I was able to make a couple circus catches, get everything arranged. Always
Perfect.
Good. So, as we creep up on the 30th championship game of the Arena Football League, it's around the time to where the league announces the postseason awards. We've already heard Playmaker of the Year, Kendrick Ings, deservedly. We have just named Receiver of the Year. Let me go and look back at that.
Joe Hills, I believe, right?
That's right, Joe Hills.
Yep.
I wanted to make sure because I have my notes a little bit scattered here, but again, with what he's done with the record-breaking touchdown streak, deserved. But there are a few other awards left to be dealt out here, so we're going to be spending tonight's episode talking about those. Now, for starters, let's get with what's already out of the way. Playmaker of the Year. Now, Kendrick Ings, part of an immensely talented receiving corps in Tampa Bay, and also a major driving force on special teams. I'm somewhat uncertain about who the other candidates were, because to me, Ings kind of won this going away.
Oh, same here. Of course, I had the chance to watch him all season long. Kick returning, much improved this year. You know, he returned kicks last year for the Storm. Big time improvement this year. And of course, he was even more of a threat as a wide receiver. So I'm trying to see, is there somewhere that lists the candidates, or I don't think they gave us a list, but
no, I haven't seen him.
I can definitely see. I mean, it's a perfect award for him because, you know, like we said, kick returning and wide receiver, he can do it all. He had a couple onside kicks that he returned back. He had balls off the net. He had long, amazing catches in the end zone for touchdowns. Actually, just won the playoff game, I remember, against Cleveland. So, you know, pretty fitting for him to win that one.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at his totals, especially the kick return came and in all-purpose yards, I mean, it was him going far and away. Now, what's really intriguing is with him winning Playmaker of the Year, I would think he was also in contention with Joe Hills for Receiver of the Year as well.
I would think so. Joe Hills, set the AFL record, 81 consecutive games with a receiving touchdown, which is pretty crazy. But I'm not sure who else was on the wide receiver list of the year. I'm trying to look now, but I can see, Kendrick Ings for sure could be in consideration for that, but I think the Playmaker one fits him better.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I'm actually looking Kendrick Ings 4 touchdown kickoff returns for touchdowns this year. That's the most in his 3 years. And as far as receiving, 22 touchdowns for Kendrick Ings. So yeah, he's up there. Over 2,300 yards. So, I'm sorry, 1,100 yards, 2,300 in his career. But yeah, Playmaker for sure for him. I like the pick with Joe Hills for the receiver.
Absolutely, because I mean, even if you look at teams with Philadelphia, yes, you have McDaniel and SK. You look at Cleveland, Quentin Sims. It's just, you take away Hills from Randy Hippard, you take away a big portion of that offense. I mean, yes, you can still piecemeal a lot together, but Hills was obviously signed to be the focal point, and he came through in spades.
Absolutely. You mean the Storm were 2-14 last year. Joe Hills was with Jacksonville, of course, and then they go 10-4 this year, and it's the second greatest statistical turnaround in AFL history. So I mean, I don't want to. It's not a one-man team, but it's he has a lot to do with the Storm's success for sure.
Oh yeah, we're going pretty close, and that kind of segues to some of the other offensive awards. Now, as it's been with the AFL, and I'm sure you know this, you being one of the top media guys covering this league for a long time, the league has gone into a pattern of, okay, your best quarterback, MVP. Your second best quarterback, Offensive Player of the Year. Now, given the race that developed throughout the season between Dan Rodabaugh and Randy Hippard, are we going to see this again? Or could potentially Joe Hills throw a little bit of wrench into that and pick up yet another award, being one of those two?
That's a solid question. I have my notes here on Hippard and Rodabaugh for MVP, the cases for MVP. But I have Joe Hills as a possible, offensive player of the year. Can he be the MVP? It's a tough call. I think it's a quarterback-driven league for sure. So I think it's going to stay quarterbacks for the foreseeable future. But I can see Hills certainly making a case for MVP of the league, 100%.
Yes, because again, with Hippard, even though he had his first full healthy season, thankfully in quite some time, what he was able to do piloting that offense, completion percentage is just way up there. Again, he looked early and often to Joe Hills, with Ings and Lamarck Brown sort of being secondary and tertiary. But
right,
I'm always curious because, again, with Joe Hills and even the situation late in the regular season, with the suspension, with going to Jacksonville in the NAL, he still came back and didn't miss a beat. I would hope that factors in a little bit. I mean, even if he winds up finishing third.
Absolutely, I agree with that completely. The suspension situation was very odd. What week was that he left? I have it somewhere down on here that he wasn't really actually. Was he suspended? I don't think he was ever officially suspended by the league. Maybe he missed the one game. I think you're right. Actually, he was. I know. So he missed 2 games total. Was it?
Because it was the one game that he played for Jacksonville, which was actually their semifinal.
And then he missed that following.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So that was an odd situation, but I agree with you. He should be right up there for MVP.
Yeah. And this is something that, even if you look at the quarterbacks, really 1 through about 7, factoring in the different quarterbacks you had in Baltimore and Washington, okay, you could make a case for Arvell Nelson getting a few votes for what he did once he became the man again for the Gladiators. You can even make a case for Shane Carden, who Steven and I have discussed on past episodes, Rookie of the Year going away. I think he would get a couple of votes, but I mean, beyond that, there are a couple quarterbacks with the way that they played. I would take Joe Hills over them just about any day of the week.
Absolutely. Agree. Those ones you just mentioned, Arvell Nelson with Cleveland, looking at the rest, and I don't see anyone beating Hills on here, so, I agree.
Yeah, and kind of tying into that, we mentioned Shane Carden. Is it still a formality at this point? Are there going to be any other surprises for Rookie of the Year? Because for what he did going and taking over for Cartwright at the beginning of the season, and how Baltimore performed, leading an upset over Philadelphia, breaking their undefeated streak, and even though he went out with a concussion, ended his season prematurely, they weren't quite the same even going in the playoffs. I don't know if any other rookies that come close to having that much of an impact as he did.
No, I completely agree. He has my vote going away for that award. I'm looking at his numbers now, and they're really not too... I mean, he has 3,100 yards,
Ooh.
to Hippert's 3,600, 63 touch. I mean, his numbers are right there with Hippert's, to be honest, with the exception of the interceptions. He has double the amount of interceptions. But, I mean, going away, he's the Rookie of the Year. Baltimore... expansion team. I got to go out there for the Storm. I believe it was week 5. It was kind of a interesting atmosphere. The fans were still trying to learn the game. Really, to be honest with you, they didn't know what was going on for the first 2 quarters. It was getting really loud in the final quarter when it was coming down to it. But it was an interesting atmosphere for sure. But no, Carden, absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah, and. I mean, to me, there's no doubt. It's normally you've got a little bit of a race. I mean, we obviously could see that on defense because with scoring going down, as it did for the most part of this season, very few teams were able to put up 60 in a game. You even rarely saw 70. So it really hasn't been like the past couple of years. So... who are some of the top defensive guys that you're seeing as far as getting awards?
I've been looking all night, really. I don't know. Have you come up with anybody? Because I'm looking for names, and I just, such an offense. I mean, offense. That's all I'm looking at tackles and interceptions, and certainly not anybody on the Storm, who I am most familiar with.
No, I mean...
But I'm interested to see what names you have. Do you have any names at all?
Well, I was thinking more Philadelphia. You have guys like Gooseby or going up in Baltimore for coming up what he did late in this season. Varmasoni. Those are guys I would say, and I would like to see them get some recognition for what they did.
I agree. Alvin Ray Jackson here had a nice season in Tampa Bay. Looking at a couple DBs. It's tough. It's a tough award because there's not much defense played. Let's be honest. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, and it really is. And aside from those, I mean, okay, maybe you would have even in Cleveland at linebacker Frederick Obi, but while there is a little bit more defense this year in years past, there's been no real key names that have really distinguished themselves.
No, I'm really stuck on this one. I'll have to look at it more, honestly. But I agree with some of the names you said. I'm stuck though for the most part. I really am.
Yeah, and
it's one award that I can't figure out.
Well, trust me, you're not alone. I mean, I was sitting there racking my brain and trying to figure out everyone, even to see, okay, maybe try to throw the Valor a little bit of a bone, but that was even harder sledding. So I would love to be a fly on the wall when the league decides, okay, who's Defensive Player of the Year, because it's a surprisingly crowded field.
Absolutely. I'm looking at Tracy Belton in Washington. Let's see. 5 interceptions. Okay. He's on here on the first on the All-Arena team. So, I mean, he's in there, but that's about it for Washington, really. So, yeah. It's a tough one. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of sad because you look at Washington, a 2-win team. I mean, do you think that would take something away from Tracy Belton? Because 5 picks for that kind of a defense was pretty meaningful.
Absolutely. Like you said, 2-win team. him winning that award might be the highlight of their season, to be honest. So I'm looking at the rest of this All Arena first team. Tracy Belton, Dwayne Hollis is on there for the Soul, of course. But yeah, I mean, that one has me stumped. It really does.
Well, I mean, I completely forgot about Dwayne Hollis. Oh boy. Yeah, I think there's really no surprise and very few wrong answers for this one, but as I see, you do have the first team All Arena in front of you?
I do. I'm looking at Dwayne Hollis, 7 picks this year. 2 of them returned for touchdowns, so not bad.
Not bad
I am
at all.
looking. No, I am looking at the first team, yes, though. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's try to go through, because I would guess who would be first team quarterback. I mean,
It is Randy Hippard. Mm-hmm.
Thought so. I was thinking to myself, I mean, it's like I could see potential for ArenaBowl, but with Hippard and how he did, as you said, 3,600 yards and incredibly high completion percentage. I think, wasn't it mid to upper 60s?
It was. Let me look for the percentage. Hippard, though, led the entire league in 3 categories: total offense, 36-26, passing touchdowns with 82, and passing yards, 35-06. So that's 3 categories he led the Arena League in this year. Let me see what his. I'm not positive. His completion percentage. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. I was actually looking at his stats from last year when he was with Orlando, and he nearly doubled all 3 of them. The total offense, passing touchdowns, and passing yards. Like, just a total... I mean, he nearly doubled all of them. So, I mean, outstanding season from him. Let's look at completion percentage. 66.4. Yep.
Yeah, I was spot on, because I know he's usually between a 65 and 70, and again, I knew when Tampa Bay had brought him in, I thought to myself, okay, if he can stay upright and healthy, which he did, and he had to run a little bit too, this could be a very dynamic team, and this just proves it. Now, I'm hoping for wide receivers, Joe Hills, I would obviously put him first team All Arena. I would kind of consider Quentin Sims as well. Maybe even T.T. Tolliver from Washington, so...
Neither of those guys. Sims is on the second team.
Really?
He is. And I don't see T.T. Tolliver on either team, surprisingly.
Wow.
Yeah, I do not... I'm looking, scanning again. No T.T. Tolliver. I think he did have, by his standards, a down year. I mean, it didn't help he was playing on the worst team in the league. Of course, he played on the worst team in the league last year with the Storm, so...
Yeah, and I mean, it's a big difference when you have, and no disrespect to Sean Brackett, but when you have him throwing to you, you got to do with what you can.
Right. Yeah, no Tolliver on either the first or the second team. Let's see. 524 yards, 12 touchdowns for Tolliver this year. So, and for comparison, he had 25 touchdowns with the Storm last year. So half the touchdowns, half the yardage, and less than half the amount of receptions. So really, he had a down year. He really did.
Yeah, you feel bad, and especially for what he's done in his career, closing in on 15,000 yards, and you look at all the span of all the professional football, you're talking top 5 all time in that category.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yep.
It's a little bit of a shame.
It is. And like I said, being on a bad team didn't help, but, I don't think he's too worried about being on the first or second team this year, honestly. Because his career goes much further than that. But much further.
Oh, absolutely. And looking, kind of rounding out the first team, Randy Hippard, Michael Benson, Joe Hills. No surprises there. Darius Reynolds, Kendrick Ings. Again, No surprises there. Ray McNeil, Wayne Tribune, and Anthony Parker along the offensive line. Now, Parker, kind of confused about, because I know between Eric Meyer, Brackett, a lot of those quarterbacks were getting not so much beat up a little. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to try
That
to be
is
nice,
surprising.
but they were like, they got beat up a bit throughout this season. But
I'm wondering if each team just had to have a representative on there, because if you look at it, it's Tampa Bay, Philadelphia. I mean, the entire, there's 2 Washington players and 1 Baltimore on the entire first team All Arena. The rest is all, so.
yeah. And then you see Cleveland, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys themselves on the second team. So, I mean,
And none on the first.
No, which I find a little bit weird, but considering what they did, and they did manage to finish with the 3 seed, I'm like, okay. Kind of a little quirk there, but definitely kudos to them. And this kind of shows, and this is another one of those things that Steven and I have talked about. Imagine if Arvell Nelson were given the reins again week 1 like he should have been.
It may have been a different season for sure.
I mean, absolutely.
He was I know his numbers don't really show it in the playoff game here last week in Tampa, but he was impressive. He threw 1 pick, and it was on the final play of the game. It was just one of those, Hail Mary. The game was over, and that was his only pick. But we actually, all of us at the game, were very impressed with him during that game. So, you're right. I think it would have been a different season for them.
Yeah, because I mean, even with that, yes, they struggled, but they still managed to get to 5-9. Hung tough with Tampa Bay for really 3 quarters in their semifinals. So you figure, even if you would just split those 2 opening games, that's at the very least 6-8, maybe even 7-7, and then who knows?
Right. Looking at his numbers now, I mean, how many games did he end up playing total for them? Let's see. I don't know if it'll tell me on here.
I want to say 12, because it was
12.
Shane Boyd in the opener, then Tanner Marsh, then finally Arvell Nelson the rest of the season.
Okay. And, Arvell Nelson completed 64% of his passes, 61 touchdowns. So,
Yeah, I mean Gladiators kind of take note, because you've got something good, just leave it to him.
yeah, next year's starter, for sure. Yeah.
And now, as we are wrapping up, we're going to wrap up the show tonight. 2 things to kind of bring everything in perspective. We mentioned it earlier, the MVP race. Who do you see winning? And also, who do you see as Offensive Player of the Year?
Okay, all biases aside, I have Randy Hippard as the MVP. Like the 3 stats I gave you earlier, leading the league in total offense, passing touchdowns, and passing yards, doubling his stats. It's something about Hippard I actually want to point out. The comeback wins. I mean, I have 4 written down here, and that's just off the top of my head. Cleveland twice, on the road at Baltimore, and on the road at Washington. I mean, all 4 of those games. We're talking the last minute of the game, 1 minute warning. He leads the Storm to win all 4 of those games. And there was more, but that was something we didn't see from Hippard in the past when he was first with the Storm. Not at all. His first go around with the Storm. So, only 8 interceptions. It's Hippard for me. The MVP for me is Randy Hippard, and then Offensive Player of the Year, I have Joe Hills for, the 81 consecutive games with the touchdown. That's a record. He's just too much of a threat not to do it. I think it's. I don't even think it's really that close, to be honest with you. So Hippard, MVP. ArenaBowl makes a great case. I mean, I'm looking at his numbers too. Threw a couple more interceptions than Hippard. He's beaten Hippard every time he's faced him, I believe. But I'm gonna go Randy Hippard MVP and Joe Hills Offensive Player of the Year.
Now, before I say that I definitely have to agree with you, and again, following Tampa Bay myself, all biases aside, you bring up an interesting point with ArenaBowl. He's beaten Hippard every time he's faced him this season, but
yep.
There was one thing that I noticed with ArenaBowl, especially from the middle of this season on. He kind of fixed it towards the end. ArenaBowl was prone to very slow starts. There were a lot of games this season to where those first 2-3 series of the game, he wasn't connecting with receivers. He felt rushed, overthrew, underthrew, miscommunication, and those led to some of his interceptions. Whereas with Hippard, miles different from what you saw when he was first with the Storm, and I think even further improved than what we saw in Orlando. And that was when he was completing over 70% of his passes that season before he went down with injury. So with this, knowing, okay, how can I execute with these patterns? How can I get the ball to Joe Hills, but can I also sprinkle in my other talented receivers to whereas, okay, they can't just try to double or put extra help on Hills and then it gets me stuck. I can run when I have to. He had much, much better decision making beginning to end, and even with going down with an ACL injury, he wasn't fearful, very fearless in his return back.
No, you're absolutely right. And Hippard, everything around him was better this year. The coaching, the receivers, Kendrick Ings, Mike Lindsay, Lamarck Brown, I mean, the talent, just everything around him was better. So that made him better. And I look at ArenaBowl and his team just has one loss. He's probably on the better team. If you go strictly by the numbers, but his numbers, I was looking at the ArenaBowl, not nearly as good this year as 15 and 16. So but still great. So it's close. It's definitely close, but you made good points as well. So I think it's Randy Hippard.
Yeah, and I have to make that same case for even with Offensive Player of the Year. Dan ArenaBowl, with the good core, bringing back just about everybody, with a good coach in Clint Alzell, and that'll be the last award that we get to before I ask you one big question and then we wrap things up. He had those sort of measured expectations. Okay, this is what we've seen. This is what you can do. So we figure, you can go ahead and do this. Just like a lot of people thought Philadelphia was going to be a good team. This dominant? Maybe not exactly, but coming up like that under the pressure, I think Joe Hills did just a little bit better. He was signed with Tampa Bay to be the number one target. He had the weight of the streak, knowing that he could break the record coming into this season, broke the record, and it's still counting. So I think with Hills, it's those sort of extra intangibles, like I give to Hippard for MVP, I have to use those intangibles to give him Offensive Player of the Year.
You're right, and I totally agree. He came here to be the number one receiver. He was the number one receiver, not only on the Storm, but in the entire league. And, I'm not going to hold the... I know there was some controversy at the time with him, leaving his team in the middle of a playoff race, or but I'm not going to hold that against him. Everything points to him. So
believe me, I have my own rumors and theories about that, knowing Jacksonville, knowing Tampa Bay, but that's for a different show entirely. So, and finally, to wrap up with the awards, Coach of the Year. Now, again, with respective biases, we were trying to be objective, but I said at the beginning of the season, Ron James is very capable. You give him a stable situation with a stable front office and a lot of talent, let him see what he can do. Look what he did. Whereas with Clint Dalzell, it's kind of been, lather, rinse, repeat.
Well, I cover the Storm. I'm closest to the Storm, and now my 3 awards are all 3. Randy Hippert, MVP, Joe Hills, wide receiver of the year, and I'm going also with Coach Ron James as Coach of the Year. 20 seasons in the Arena Football League, and this is his first Arena Bowl appearance. So, he watching the Storm last year, just even small things like time management at the end of games, and it's so noticeably different and better and improved that it's I have to give it to Ron James. I mean, he's a great guy. I've gotten pretty close with him in interviews and such, post game and things like that. He's really likable guy. He knows what he's talking. He knows the game of arena football like nobody I've ever seen. I mean, it's just so it's Ron James. Well deserved after all these years to get to the Arena Bowl finally.
Especially the catastrophe that was Portland. I mean, bless him for going through that, and at the very least, even making them semi-competitive. But I mean, just wow.
Yep. So.
And now, the big question. We're sitting here. We are 5 days away, and I have to ask, Arena Bowl 30, who you got?
I'm picking the Soul. After all the praises I just gave the Storm, the home field advantage, the Soul own the Storm all time. It's a 15-5, the all-time series. The last time the Storm won in Philly, they haven't beaten them since 2012. I know that, or 2014, one of the two. I think I got a mix. Maybe it was 2014 the last time they beat them, but 2012 was the last time in Philadelphia. One of the two. But the point is, it's been forever. They historically own the Storm. I think it's too much. The Storm played them 3 times this year. The third one being the closest, but still, it was like a double-digit defeat, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check. It was, yeah. So I think it's just too much for the Storm. Huge strides this year. I'm giving them every postseason award I can, but it's just not enough for me to pick them to win the game. I don't. I think it'll be close the first half, and the Soul pull away. I do.
And I was asked, because I can't just let you go with that. It's being someone who covers the Storm, and I was someone at the beginning of this season. I thought Tampa Bay Philly was going to be the matchup. I just thought it was going to be at Amalie Arena. Throw me a bone at the very least. Is there any ways? I can see ways to where they have a chance of pulling it off. Do you see those same things?
I can absolutely. I can see I can definitely see. There's definitely a chance. They're not gonna go in there and get crushed like last year's playoff game against the Soul. But it's tough for me to pick against Philly. This is the Storm's first time to the Arena Bowl since 2010. The Soul have been there and done that the last couple of years at home. It's hard for me to pick against them, but can I see it going a different way? Of course. The Storm certainly have enough talent and enough firepower. We just talked about Joe Hills and Hippert combo. And it's not, like I said, the Storm aren't a one-man team. They have guys you maybe are under the radar. Michael Lambo-Lindsay returning kicks and catching balls. Lamarck Brown, Kendrick Ings, Playmaker of the Year. So it's certainly possible. I'm going to stick with the Soul, though. I have to.
Okay, that's fair. You've at least got some good rationale, and I can take that. I can sleep tonight accepting that. But
Okay.
Connor Akeman, thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me, Eric. It was a great time. Enjoyed talking with you.
Well, that's fantastic. I enjoyed doing the show with you as well. We definitely have to have you back on.
Sounds great to me.
Alrighty, so if you enjoyed tonight's episode, well, you're in luck because we have another one lined up for tomorrow as we continue our week-long march to the Wells Fargo Center for ArenaBowl XXX. But if you're curious about this week in the AFL in general, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Google Play, we got you covered no matter what. And although you were listening, much appreciated. If you're curious about any other different podcasts, well, go to W2Mnet.com. We got wrestling, we got video games, we got soccer, which again, you'll hear me actually going off on a few more people. We also have some great articles, so you name it, you'll be satisfied. And again, one last thanks to Connor Akeman, covering the Tampa Bay Storm. And you listen to This Week in the AFL, and we will see you tomorrow.
The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.